Boko Haram. Al-Shabab. As Western media intermittently covers their atrocities and crimes, these two groups constantly terrorize the populations of Nigeria and Somalia. They adhere to extremely strict interpretations of Sharia, or Islamic law, and at first glance seem to have no other purpose than spreading chaos. But why do these groups even exist, and what's being done about it? Well, let's start by critically and historically examining Boko Haram. Boko Haram started in the city of Maiduguri, Nigeria in the year 2002 by a man named Muhammad Yusuf. It first went by the name of Jama'at al-Sunnah lid-Da'wati wal-Jihad, meaning people committed to the propagation of the Prophet's teachings and jihad. However, the people in the city called it Boko Haram, which loosely translated into Western education is forbidden, since Yusuf's teachings rejected anything remotely connected to the West. He wanted to create an Islamic state, and the schools and mosques he created became recruiting grounds for jihadists to fight the state. But what causes hatred of the West? It's probably due to the indirect rule the British used during colonization, which affected northern Nigeria negatively. The South received more Western education, while the North suffered under various emirs that reported to British authorities. By the time Nigeria received its independence, the economic and educational gaps between the North and South caused considerable tensions between them. This northern Nigeria was the perfect place for Boko Haram to form. After a spate of attacks on government buildings in Maiduguri, including the police headquarters, Muhammad Yusuf was captured and executed. The Nigerian government declared Boko Haram finished. If only. Soon after, they attacked a prison holding Boko Haram supporters in the state of Bauchi, releasing and probably recruiting hundreds of inmates. They carried out many attacks against Christians. They wanted to install Islamic law in Nigeria and recruited disillusioned and impoverished people who opposed the vast income differences and corruption in society. Clearly, Boko Haram did not form out of some religious purpose. They arose because of the wide socio-economic gap that British indirect rule left in place and that the Nigerian government has not attempted to improve. Though they now wish to create a despotic Islamic state, they lack a declaration of independence, which perhaps shows how low their popular support truly is. But why has this rebellion in particular been so successful? It's largely because the government of Nigeria seems to be unable to deal with them decisively. In fact, the government's heavy-handed tactics often antagonize local populations and create more Boko Haram sympathizers. There's also the fact that any supporter of Boko Haram not imprisoned or killed has a large chance of starting a new rebellion with the aim to avenge fallen comrades. So how are people approaching this problem? Well, countries like Niger are trying to integrate a few fighters. As of December of last year, Niger has attempted to hire more than 150 ex-combatants of Boko Haram. The biggest issue they have found is getting the community to accept the ex-combatants. Though the process of acceptance is long, Niger remains optimistic they can carry out their goal. Next, time to examine Al-Shabab. Al-Shabab has a complicated history with roots tracing back into the 1980s. A group called Al-Ittihad Al-Islamiyya developed in 1983 largely because of the Somali diaspora and war in Somaliland. It supported a strict Wahhabi string of Sharia, but was mainly a political group. It eventually split in 1995 into many different groups because of differing clan allegiances. Eventually, the group Al-Shabab emerged with a militia that minimized clan allegiance. At the height of their power, they controlled much of southern Somalia and the capital of Mogadishu. A large part of Al-Shabab can be traced back to American intervention in Somalia. After a bungled UN-partnered relief effort in the 1990s, America and the UN largely left Somalia alone until 9/11, when the War on Terror started. The Bush administration produced a series of failed political interventions aimed at creating a central government supported by the transitional federal government. After a furious 4-month battle for Mogadishu, with the Islamic Courts Union, Al-Shabaab's predecessor, coming out on top, the US then supported an Ethiopian invasion into Somalia, killing hundreds of civilians in the process. By the time Ethiopia withdrew in 2009, having propped up the TFG government in Mogadishu, Al-Shabaab's influence had spread throughout southern Somalia. They have few connections outside of Somalia, though they have been known to support Al-Qaeda. Boko Haram has also allegedly sent a few people to train with Al-Shabaab, though recent external pressures have made things difficult. What external pressures? Well, namely that Kenya and the African Union have both begun military interventions into Somalia. The Western world hasn't really wanted to intervene in Somalia after previous failures, but they're slowly opening up. America, at least, has cautiously offered help. In March of 2017, President Trump approved a directive that allows tougher action against Al-Shabaab, promising dozens of troops. The point of this entire historical context is to again show that religion is only a small part of a larger picture. Al-Shabaab rose to power in a country lacking stability and security because of Western interference and gave the people of Somalia some semblance of society. As time moves, they've increasingly become more radicalized and violent, but, like Boko Haram, they did not form out of some religious sense of duty. Originally, they were just a group of opportunistic individuals seeking power in a country that lacked it all. Many different solutions have emerged to solve the problem of Al-Shabab. As said before, Kenya and the African Union have begun military incursions in an attempt to eliminate Al-Shabab. Though fighting is difficult against the guerrilla fighters, they're slowly making progress. Additionally, Western powers like America are tentatively extending help. Though they remain wary from previous attempts, there's hope. Finally, Somali Sufi groups like Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaa have begun to condemn Al-Shabab's actions and have taken up arms against the terrorist organization. After all, why should the mainly Sufi Somalia support violent Wahhabis who destroy Sufi holy sites? But although steps have been taken to fight these groups, if the root causes remain, then more and more groups like these will pop up. For Nigeria, corrupt politicians need to disappear. A better effort to reduce the socio-economic gap between the northern and southern parts would drastically decrease support for groups like Boko Haram. For Al-Shabab, stability in Somalia is paramount. Kenya and the African Union seem to have the short-term goal of just wiping out Al-Shabab, but they'll only come back in a different form. Groups like Al-Shabab thrive when there's no law and order, but if some powerful authority actually steps in to provide security, Al-Shabab truly would not have much more support. All this is much easier said than done. It would probably take years of fighting, struggling, and help from other more powerful countries to make these goals reality. However, the first steps are always the hardest, and as time advances, I have faith that countries like America and groups like the United Nations will come together and offer Africa another hand.